Okay, hi everyone. It's the Mind Masters podcast. I am really excited to be bringing this episode. This episode's been in the works a little bit for the last few weeks. I'm going to be joined by David Millar, who is the founder of the men's mantra kind of movement, if you like, which you're going to hear so much more about during this conversation. I have been following David's stuff for a while now. I get totally intrigued by his Facebook stories, trying to work out what is this about. As someone who started sort of cult groups, if you like, in the past, and it's always had people going, tell me about that. What is it you guys do? And I'm like, I can't really explain it. You just need to join it and just let yourself find out. So what David does is a little bit about that, and this conversation will not only try and explain some of that to you, but I'm hoping we really get to understand the reasons behind why David started this, who David is, and really how you can get involved if you choose. So welcome, David, to the Mind Masters podcast. Thank you very much for coming on, bud. Even in our offline intro there, I can already tell we're going to have a really good conversation.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. It's great.
Good, man. So, again, what I always say to the guests is some people that listen, watch this will know you, some people won't. So tell us a little bit about who's David Millar.
Oh, good question. Well, I suppose I'm the founder of Mantra Menswork. So Mantra Menswork is a men's coaching company. We offer coaching courses and immersive retreats for men to reconnect to themselves and find more authenticity and accountability and step into better versions of themselves. So we do that through a number of ways, but my story, I suppose, began when I first became a father. So about nearly 6 years ago now. Oof. 6 years ago, I became a father, and I was already in quite a depressive state. Things were going on in my life and my relationship that had kind of spun me out a little bit. And when I became a dad, it sent me off the deep end. I couldn't think how could I possibly be a father? How could I possibly hold this level of responsibility? How could I possibly grow up into this role? And it led me down a really deep, dark night of the soul, a dark path, and filled with suicidal ideation. Very close to taking my own life. When finally I reached out to a number of different modalities, like breath work was one of them, plant medicine was another. Finally reaching men's work. And men's work was like the cherry on the top of the cake for me. And it was what I realized that I'd needed all along. And it's what I realized I was all along, because I grew up in the Highlands of Scotland, and it's quite a stoic part of the country, a slightly different breed of man up there, very, focused and introverted. And I always felt a little bit different than some of the other men up there. I was always wanting to go a bit deeper, ask the deeper questions, not staying on surface level, trying to understand emotions, very much open with my own emotions, and using that as a way to connect to other men. And it just wasn't well received, and it was always like a little bit of, almost like I received a little bit of rejection. So that part of me was rejected by the culture that I grew up in. And then I moved away. I was a professional athlete for most of my life. I was a GB level judo player, international judo player, and Olympic weightlifter following that. And, both of those sports, highly competitive. And judo specifically, it's combat sport, it's a martial art. So, there's a lot of like combative behavior and very little vulnerability. So vulnerability not being seen as a strength at all. And I traveled the world with a group of guys, and competing all over the world, training every day. And to this day, I don't feel like I truly know some of those people. And some of the people I've met in the journey in the last 2-3 years through developing Mantra Menswork and stepping into my coaching and allowing myself to be fully authentic and fully me. Like, I've learned a lot about people, because what we do, we'll go through what we do in our retreats as well in a minute, but what we do is we open that space up for people to be completely honest And it's what I've craved for such a long time, and it's just not been. And I take responsibility as well. Some of it's my fault. I wasn't authentic when I was younger because I was trying to mold into a culture that really wasn't really for me. But for lots of different reasons, I was in that for um, reasons that didn't serve me, and I wasn't being true to myself. So, coming out of professional sport, moving into coaching, I was a coach, running my own business, coach education tutor for a number of years, and then ended up working in councils with active schools and stuff as well. And that just kind of led me to realize, oh, actually, I don't think this is for me. I need to bring this part of me back online and step into more purpose. And it actually kind of came about when my dad developed cancer over a year ago. He's now cancer free, which we're over the moon about. But when that happened, I realized, holy shit, I grew up and I didn't really see that much of my dad. My parents are together and I grew up in a very loving home, but I didn't see my dad that much because he just worked all the time.
Yeah.
And I was starting to perpetuate that cycle where I was working all the time. I wasn't seeing my three kids. I'd kind of overcome the depression through all of the things that I was speaking about, and started making up for maybe the first 2 years. I would say I'm a recovering shit dad. Like in the first 2 years, I wasn't a great dad, but I've made up for it. I've forgiven myself and I've moved forward, and now I believe I'm a really, really great dad. But my dad getting cancer was a catalyst for me to really think, what is this all about? Like if my dad dies and I don't know him, even worse if he dies and he doesn't know me, like what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of gave me this massive perspective shift where I was looking at my own life, my relationship to my children, my relationship to my parents, what I was actually doing in this world, and just decided, you know what, I'm going to leave my job and I'm going to step into this passion driven, purpose filled life and vocation. And that's what I do now. I offer spaces for men to come and open up and share themselves fully.
See, go back to what you were just telling me about when things were really bad.
Mm-hmm.
So now, so many men out there, so many people. It's sometimes I've got to check myself. I want to think about the male subject, but I realise that there's a lot of women out there that are feeling the exact same way. But
Yeah.
going back to that time where you feel the way you feel, you're in the pits, and you talk about the fact that the people, you don't really relate well to the people around you, the influences, the different people, so you're not able to articulate that. How do you what's this first steps of getting yourself out of that situation? Because so many guys right now, so many people are in that situation right now.
Mm.
What's the first steps? Because you transported us through quite fast. But what you're at that point.
I think for
What do
me,
you do?
connection, um, connection is one of the cures for me. Like brotherhood is medicine, and connection is the cure. It's a infamous tagline from the company Sacred Sons that I trained with in men's work facilitation, and it's so true. Connection is the cure. Now, when I was coming out of my depression, one of the biggest things for me was helping other men. And that's when I realized that this was so important, because I was, walking around the local park in Glasgow South Side. And, as I started to get more healthy, I was walking around this park with other men who were maybe seeing me, get into a better stage, and they were starting to feel a little bit worse, or they were always, feeling the same way as me. And I've started getting healthy, and they're like, what's going on? How have you done this? And just by holding space for men and allowing them to be really honest, telling the truth, telling the real truth, and letting go of all these um, barriers or limiting beliefs or stigmas that we have around masculinity and male vulnerability, And when I started doing that, when I started holding space for these men around the park, I realized, holy shit, this is really powerful stuff, because it allows men to get in touch with something that they're repressing very deeply, and that can isolate us. Because right now, in doing that, you put yourself in that state of isolation, and that is a cultural epidemic. We are in a stage of, male emotional isolation, because we're so guarded, we're so scared. And it's hard to admit that as a man, that when you're scared to open up, or you're scared about, maybe a lot of men experience fear of failure, or fear of rejection, or fear of abandonment, or all of these different things. These core wounds keep us, locked up in ourselves. So for me, it is about connection. This this form of, it's not a therapy. Coaching isn't a therapy, but it's a space where men can come and work through stuff and feel accepted. And it's that acceptance, because when we're bottling stuff up as men, the people we tend to go to first of all is our romantic partners, and that isn't always received very well. So when I've got an issue, and I can only speak from my own experience, so when I had an issue, I would go to my partner, and I would be almost desperate to fix what was going on. But in sharing so openly and vulnerably and seeking help from my romantic partner, and this won't be the same for everyone, but it often changes the dynamic of the relationship, where our partner, has to switch off her feminine, turn on her masculine, and start looking after you. And they also change the dynamic slightly into like a mothering role, where taking your own responsibility over your healing and seeking it outside of the relationship is really, really beneficial, because it allows you to go and work through stuff, and your partner will witness you doing that. And 9 times out of 10, you'll come back into the relationship after being away for a day or an afternoon or a weekend retreat, and you'll have your cup filled up. You'll have understood something about yourself. You'll have more questions for them, and they will witness you going through this transition, and, be more attracted to that, or respect that a little bit more. But because there haven't been spaces for men to do that in a healthy way, we've got, kind of pseudo ones like pub culture and,
Yep.
sport, like the football, that nobody's really going deep in those environments and actually trying to understand how they feel about stuff. That's one of the biggest questions I ask men, and their face go completely
Yep.
blank when they're saying something. I say, oh, how did that make you feel? And they're like, I wasn't thinking about how I felt. I was like, no, we often aren't thinking about how we feel. So when we come into these spaces, we're not even asked to think how we feel. We're asked to speak about how we feel and open up completely. We start to realize that we're the medicine for each other as men, because we're one man's lacking in something, another man will show up in abundance, and we'll be able to really support one another in a really healthy way. And that's what, men's council is. That's like the ancient technology of men's council. We used to gather for thousands of years as men to strategize and support and learn and grow and call each other forwards
Yep.
with healthy levels of accountability, because a lot of men also make excuses about things to kind of avoid accountability, and that can again drive, and that's part of the depressive mindset, where you kind of go in and in and in, and you can explain things away and rationalize and make excuses about things. But when you start stepping into a space with strong, embodied, responsible, mature men asking you the questions, calling you forward, helping you take accountability for your actions and your own healing and your own thinking, then it kind of changes how you perceive yourself and how you perceive the world. So when I started doing that, that's when I realized a big shift in me and in other men coming along. And I think that's one of the most powerful things we can do, is seek out a group of men to start being really honest and working through our problems together.
And I love the way you've just sort of ended into that. I think in my own story, and I think as I listened to you when you were in the Highlands and you were sort of maybe a bit isolated, I think the amount of times where, before I started my own sort of growth, where I felt vulnerable inside that I needed to speak about how I was really feeling. But when you look to the left and you look to the right, so much of the conversations you have with those people who, of course, care about you, but they don't truly know where you are, and you don't feel truly comfortable to just let that out. And you see a lot of what you're doing with rooms full of men, where even though they've never met, they're sharing truths and they're being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so many people must just be holding on to so much.
Totally. So I've had men at the spaces that I hold that are telling things that they have never told anyone,
Yeah.
like holding on to truth their entire life, and that stuff can be really, really damaging. It can really fester inside us if we've got a truth or something we've done or something we've said or something we didn't say that's inside us for such a long time. Then I always say it's like a guitar. Like you could be playing a guitar, but if one string's out of tune, then it sounds shit. So this is what we were doing at these events, is we're trying to tune that guitar, like taking all the little bits that you've maybe just left out or you've made excuses for or you've just forgotten about and just pushed down. Like, I don't need to, nobody needs to know about that. Well, if you want to be fully embodied and the best version of yourself, then you're going to have to sift through all the shadows and fully integrate them into your being, because the shadows have lessons. And if we don't look at the shadows, then we'll never learn who we truly are. That's the point of shadow work. You need to know thyself in order to do the shadow work. So you need to really go deep and start, mining for that information. And it can be uncomfortable, but that's the whole point. And that's why it's such a safe space, because as men, whatever comes out, it's a men's only space. The energy can be held. If you've got something that comes out raw, it can be held by that group of men. And even more than that, we have this notion as men that when we're vulnerable, it's perceived as weakness.
Yeah.
In those spaces, vulnerability is strength. So it's so interesting, the catharsis that happens when men start to share and they realize, oh, I'm not being judged for this. These men don't see me as a weak man. They actually see this as something strong, because that's what it is. You're doing the shadow work and you're trying to be a better version of yourself. That's courageous work. It's actually weak to avoid doing this work. So if you're stepping into that space and open up, then the men in that space are like, yes, more, more, more. And you see men just lighting up like, oh my God, I can tell more truth. I can do this. I can do that. I can work through my stuff in a safe space and no one will judge me. Phenomenal.
And see this kind of work with people, David. You find I've done a lot of looking and thinking about the latest crazies that are going about these days. The latest dopamine chasing things. How does this? What's the sustainability piece of this? How for people who don't understand fully how this works? How is this stuff different from all the other things that we hear about just now, from cold dipping to the different things, getting a quick fix? How's this different?
So this is different in a number of ways. And I think it's because it's bringing back a sense of community that we've long forgotten as men, where we can really hold each other and witness each other through healthy conflict resolution, understanding our emotions, reframing our thinking, checking our behaviors, holding each other accountable, passing on wisdom and sharing the wealth of wisdom amongst ourselves. That's what kind of makes it different, because all the other things are communities and they're great and they're wonderful and there's so many benefits to cold water and breath work and all that stuff is absolutely fantastic. But sometimes it can be, still quite isolating, because you're going along yourself, you're having an experience yourself, and then you're maybe coming away yourself. And that's not the same for everyone. Some people run amazing containers that are, really open and there's lots of sharing, and that's fantastic. And that is what makes this kind of stuff different, is that it's all about being as open and vulnerable as possible and sharing the truth that you have inside yourself so that you can step forward a little bit cleaner, a little bit lighter, and having worked through and understood yourself a little bit more so you can move more into your purpose. And that's the beautiful thing about this, is because like many things, when you return back to, let's say you come to one of the men's council events and you're thinking, oh, should I go back? I went along to that day already. I've already been. Is it going to be that much different? I was like, yeah, it's going to be different because you're now different. You're a different person, and the men in the room are different. So when I said earlier about, where one man shows up lacking, another man shows up in abundance, that's what this community needs.
Yep.
We need, so if you're in a good space, go and share that with somebody else, because guaranteed there's going to be something, because we're always doing the work. It's never done. There's going to be something that's still out of tune. That guitar is still going to be out of tune somewhere, and you're going to have to constantly retune it as you keep playing. A string will come out. You have to retune it again, keep playing, and then retune it again. So keeping coming to these things allows you to sharpen again and again and again. And we say that like we are sharpening each other, we're supporting each other to be better. And by going into like deep into the shadow work, and we use the kind of four main masculine archetypes for our men's council. So the king, the warrior, the lover, the magician, and we dive pretty deep into them and find out where we are out of alignment, where we're in the highest expression of them or where we're in the shadows of them. And it really identifies through some of the facilitation and questioning and sharing. Some men didn't even know that they were in the shadow expression of the lover or the magician, and having that reflected to them, like, oh man, okay, that behavior is maybe not healthy. Now I can step forward and check that out a little bit, and that will help my relationships around me, and it'll help me to show up better as a husband, a father, a colleague, a friend. All these things are so important, but I think the sustainability comes from us constantly doing the work, because it's never over.
I smile there as you started touching on the archetypes. I love that stuff. I think I messaged you about that when I saw one of your Facebook posts. And for anyone who maybe doesn't know what that is, that it's almost perspectives. It's a range of perspectives. And it's, I mean, David clearly uses it loads. It's a wonderful way of allowing you to look at how you've been looking at things or how you've been dealing with things, and then you've got the opportunity to step out of that and look at it with a different perspective, and suddenly a problem is no longer a problem. Suddenly a problem becomes an opportunity. Something that limits you can incredibly then enable you. And I love it when you work with that type of thing, because people are just so unaware of the different ways they can look at things.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because, I mean, that's all based on Jungian psychology, and Jungian psychology is one way of thinking.
Yeah.
There are loads of other and loads of other things that we bring into the Mantra Menswork stuff as well, because psychological studies show that like our brains favor like socio-emotional connection over everything else, but our brains also in doing that will move away from threat as much as possible, and that's what affects men the most. So our brains naturally favor socio-emotional situations, so connection with others, so social situations. We want to go around it, we want to be pack animals, we want to be in the crowd, we want to be a tribe. But our brains automatically, by default, seek out threat and keep us safe. They move us away from threat. And what's threatening for men? Vulnerability, appearing weak, maybe not being a viable partner for someone, maybe not being the alpha in the pack. All of these things are triggering for us. They're fear inducing. Oh, I don't want to stay away from that. Maybe I won't say that because then that'll put me down the peg, put me down a couple of pegs in this group. Whereas, like I said earlier, it's the opposite. If you're not dealing with stuff, then you're not getting any better, and you'll stay the same, and you'll stay on the surface, and you're not learning. So this is a way of learning where we can really start to fully understand ourselves by going below the surface and working with ourselves so that we can show up better for the people around us.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And you've got, usually I'm already thinking about, where I'm going next in it. But when you're telling me things, I'm just sitting thinking about my own life. I'm thinking about my own sort of influences and things like that. What do you think What's the biggest, what would I call it? Threat to a man's growth today?
Insecurity. And because because a lot of men are feeling insecure about things, whether they're conscious of it or not, they will avoid certain things, avoid discomfort. I think that's why cold water therapy is so good and it's had such a boom, because it's uncomfortable and it trains your brain to rewire the relationship with discomfort,
Yeah.
because you know there's a benefit, and you know it's 2 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever you do in the cold, but it opens or expands your sphere of competency, because your brain can't determine the difference between excitement and anxiety, or excitement and stress sometimes, because the signals are so similar. But if you're like consciously and voluntarily going into the cold water and seeing it as like a beneficial thing, and you're getting used to discomfort, then that's expands your sphere of competency, because you look at other situations like coming along to a men's council and crying and screaming and hugging and speaking to men openly and vulnerably. Some men will be like, oh, absolute no. Whereas if you're training your brain to expand your sphere of competency by leaning into the uncomfortable, you'll go along to that event and go, brilliant, what a great opportunity to grow, because that's going to push me well outside my comfort zone. So we don't have a healthy relationship with our comfort zones as men, typically in society, because we've been afforded a certain level of privilege that we can just kind of stay quiet. But that privilege comes with a price as well, because we've been, you know, I don't want to get into a feminist or patriarchal debate, but we've been pushed into a number of roles in society of the protector, provider, and with that came a certain level of responsibility, and it, as a byproduct of that, kind of forced us into separation as men, and we kind of shut down a little bit, and bringing the nuclear family into that as well, like we were even further separated as a community, because we're in our families, then men are the protector provider, they just go to work, and there's no healthy mature masculine discussions happening when that paradigm is in full flow.
Don't you think, or do you think that a big danger when a man does start to grow is how that growth is perceived by his environmental surroundings? One of the I think I would say 95% of people I speak to, and the very first conversation, I already know the environmental part that's causing damage. I can tell just in that initial conversation. And one of the things which I do see a lot is when someone starts to grow, they how they're received by what surrounds them and in the circles that they travel can be pretty damaging. Can be, well, it depends. Some people have good resilience to it, but sometimes it's like a step forward and then 3 steps back in how that's received.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about that. The first thing that comes up was a meme that I saw the other day that was just a silly meme. It was quite funny. It was of a butterfly flying over a caterpillar, and the caterpillar said, "You've changed," and the butterfly says, "Duh, we're supposed to." So it's like, obviously, and what you're not changing, you're choosing. So when people start to change, it can trigger, resentment in other people, because they start to reflect on themselves, and in that, that automatic response of the brain in psychology, we move away from fear. And if that person is not ready to look at themselves, then they can start to tear the other. You get it all the time, people tearing others down to raise themselves up. But what we should be doing, and what I'm building in Mantra Menswork, is a community where men just raise each other up. We're all raising, because that's what I want everyone to just raise up. Men to just raise each other up. Nobody's tearing each other down. Nobody's judging each other. Nobody's resenting each other. Nobody complains at any of my events. There's no complaining, because complaining is projection. You're projecting that out to other people. It's a responsibility that we hold in ourselves to take accountability for the things in our surroundings, and we can do that with pretty much everything. There are a few outliers, of course, but we can take accountability for how we think and how we feel and what our belief systems are that inform all of that, and then obviously leading through to how we behave in our kind of life. But one of the things that's really interesting is when you start to change and people start to resent you or judge you or um, sometimes just taking the piss because humor is a
Yeah.
massive avoidance tactic. What they are doing is they're trying to keep you rooted in a version of you that they are comfortable with
Yeah.
because they haven't looked at their own insecurities and they're not doing the growth themselves. So they are trying to perpetuate these stories and almost keep you tied down like a hot air balloon, keep you tied down to the ground because that keeps you rooted and it keeps them safe. It makes them feel safe.
Yeah.
And one of the most important things we can do as men, but men and women, people doing this kind of work where you're starting to grow and expand your consciousness and step into higher visions of yourself, whatever you want to call it, is put in really healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
Because when these people start to challenge us and we're not checking it in the same way that they're whatever they're not changing, they're choosing, we're choosing the same thing. If we're still tied to these people and we're still allowing them to behave like this with us, then we're choosing it.
Yeah.
If we're not changing it, we're choosing it. And you can set healthy boundaries as men and women. You can set healthy boundaries, and that's absolutely fine. You can say no. You can say, this is not healthy for me. It's not safe for me. I'm going in a direction, and and you just call it. You're trying to put me in another direction, or you're trying to keep me down with this story. Uh, and that's not me anymore. And if that continues, then we won't be able to hang out.
Did you
That's totally
experience
fine.
this, David? Did you experience this yourself as you started to become the Mantra Menswork guy, and you started to become this, you've come from a very different environment, like you say, sport and all the different things, so people think they know you, and then suddenly here you are, you put yourself out there, and you're being
Mm-hmm.
this, you're not trying to be better than anyone, but you're putting yourself out there on a, saying, here I am,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be seen. Did you sort of find what we're talking about, happen to you at any points?
I mean, yes and no. I'm not really that much in contact with some of the people from a sporting background. I do have some friends that I'm still in touch with, but one of the biggest things that sparked my depression at the same time I became a dad is I found myself very alone because I
Yeah.
kind of moved away from where I was living. I became a dad before most of the other people in my social circle, and kind of found myself a bit isolated in myself. But in hindsight, that was great because it allowed me to go inwards and really find out who I was, and realize I wasn't living a life of purpose. But for me, so yeah, for me it wasn't quite the same because
Yeah.
I was kind of stripped back already, and then as I started to find myself, I was you know gravitating towards and pulling people towards me that resonated with me. But that's not to say I don't wrestle with that myself. There are still some things that come into my mind where I'm like, oh wow, that person that I spoke to or I worked with or that knew me from back then, wonder what they would think about me now, saying all these things that I'm saying now, because I didn't behave, when I was younger, I didn't behave in the ways that I'm speaking about
Yeah.
how I behave now and how like I'm calling other men forwards to behave. Like I was the total opposite. And that's why I know, that's why I can spot it. That's why I can see some of these things when men come into the space is what they're dealing with, because I did
Yeah.
it all.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate to that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. How I look at things now is all through lessons and blessings.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's if you hadn't walked the path, how could you show someone else where the path is? Um,
Totally.
so Mantra Menswork. So first
Hmm.
of all, what inspired the name? And let's start telling people what it's about.
Mantra Menswork. So we were originally called Mantra Holistic Support because I had a number of ideas that it was going to be a holistic service. And as it evolved, it just became clear that, my work is, and it was always going to be with men, but my work is more around men's work. And as this phrase, this, coin of phrases, coming more into the, like, a popular phrase, so to speak. I felt like that was a good rebrand. So Mantra Menswork, the name came from essentially, one of the tools that I used that was really powerful for me was meditation. Um, I did a form of Vedic meditation with transcendental meditation, and that's mantra driven. And a lot of what I did through my period, my transition of healing over the last 6 years was give myself mantras. And a mantra for me was a form of manifestation. Like I was heading towards something and I would just repeat the same things over and over again. Like, I'd have my vision board, I'd have my journal where I was visioning things that I wanted to achieve and experience and how I wanted to feel. And in each meditation, I would just have these mantras that I would just repeat over and over again. And the mantra is such a powerful tool to clear our minds and focus on a vision because we're so distracted in society. We are completely inundated with things trying to distract our attention and pull us in different directions. Whereas if we're completely focused and if we know what we want to experience and want to achieve, then we're going to head there. Like I truly believe that you can manifest your visions if you're 100% focused on it. So mantra for me was something that was really important. I wanted to bring that through. I wanted to have a slightly different name, something that was important to me, but also, rolled off the tongue. And it had the word man in it as well. So I was like, oh, that's interesting, man. I could maybe, and I changed the graphic and the logo so the man was, stood out. So yeah, Mantra Menswork came from that. And what it is essentially a coaching service or a support service for men to come and regain a connection to their authentic self and step forwards into a life with more purpose and clarity. And I do that essentially focusing on main sort of transitions in life, but through my life coaching, it can be absolutely anything. It can be business, relationships, self-development, sexuality. It can be loads of different things that we can speak about in my life coaching. But the overall theme is around men either maturing into masculinity, becoming a conscious lover or partner, or taking the step into fatherhood with clarity and purpose. And that's where it kind of started for me, was like I've got 3 children now. I started as a shit dad. I really believe I'm a great dad. I've got 3 kids, 6, 3, and 1 year olds. I'm a full-time dad, a stay-at-home dad at the moment, supporting my wife to get back into the workplace, and she's working full-time, and it's absolutely fantastic, and I'm loving being with the kids. And for me, it's about supporting men to, in whichever area of life they are moving into or whichever transition they're going through, supporting them to move into that the best way they can.
And then that then sort of leads into the different ways in which you do that. So
Mm-hmm.
you talked there about sort of the coaching piece, and
Mm-hmm.
then what we were just starting to speak about just before we came on live, which is you do the sort of day events and you do the retreat events. Tell us a bit
Mm-hmm.
more about these and what they look like and what they're about.
So yeah, my life coaching is just client based. So people can get in contact with me and book me as a coach. But as the kind of retreats go, we do 1 day events which are called Men's Council. So it's a kind of remembering of that ancient technology, that ancient circle of men offering counsel to each other. So those days are pretty immersive. They're a full day, 10 till 5, really powerful, really in depth, but we can only get through as much as we can get through in 1 day. The 1 days are a refined version of the full weekend retreats, where both elements or both events go through the 4 main masculine archetypes. So we do exercises and um, embodiment practices and sharing around the 4 archetypes in the men's council day. And in the weekend, we go much deeper. So obviously, because we have more time together, the experience is more immersive. We are away from our surroundings, which is really important. If you're doing deep work and you want to to really move something, it's quite important to have some separation from the family, from your mother, from work, from life. So they come away for the full weekend retreat. It's Friday to Sunday. Really powerful weekend, full of catharsis, full of confrontation, full of connection, um, and yeah, just full of lots of acceptance and supportive energy from other men. So all of these events that I do, the 1 day events and the full weekend retreat, we do all of these exercises around the archetypes. We also do cold water on the weekend. We do some cold water, so we do ice baths and sauna therapy. We do some movement practices. We do some meditation. There's a sound healing. There's a collaborating with a guy called Ryan McKenna. He brings like an ancestral connection back to Scotland. So he runs some ceremonies on connecting to this land, like where we are in Scotland, and how powerful that is, and how magical Scotland is. So all of these things kind of create a ceremony around this rebirth or reimagining of yourself, and it's really powerful. So we get into that as much as we can in the 1 day, but we only have 1 day, and you're just coming in and out. You come along, and it's really powerful. But then the weekend retreat is where you go really deep.
And would you oh God, this will be a deep one, but would you learn about these guys across these days and weekend? Well, maybe it's a bit different. Days and weekends will probably be a different journey because of the length and depth that you get to go to. But what sort of, to generalize a little bit, from the guy arriving, I was talking to you about, I've already, I'm keen to get to one. I can't wait to get to one actually. But I guess a lot of guys would probably be like myself, full of anticipation and I guess a bit of stress and what's this going to be, and then what happens in that journey through one of your events?
One of the main things is, I guess, men realize they're not alone. One of the biggest things that drive that stress, that drive that, essentially it's a fear, because there's this apprehension that's maybe built on a bit of insecurity that has an underlying fear of, will I be accepted? What will I be able to say? What's going to be asked of me? Well, I don't know if I'm comfortable about that. But once the permission is given, and that's one thing that a lot of men I'm seeing just are desperate for. Men are desperate for permission to just speak until they have nothing else to say, and for the people in the room to just hear them and see them, and then that's it. Because one thing I say all the time at my events is, we're like pulling on the thread of a man's thought, and if somebody cuts it, then we'll never get to the other end to see what's there. And it happens all the time, particularly as dads. Like, it's so difficult to like really start to explore our own thoughts and our thinking. Like we said earlier, our thinking informs our feelings, which informs our behaviors. So if we don't get to explore our thinking, how can we start to understand who we are, what we want to do, and what we want to change? So when we come to these events, what I see is men really having this space to just think and speak and share. And we're not fixing, we're not offering advice. Nobody's offering advice at these events. It's quite a strict agreement at the beginning. We're not looking to fix people. So as you're sharing with another man, it's just to hold space for them and just to listen to them and allow them to work through it. And maybe invite them to go a bit deeper if you want to, but you're not saying, oh, yeah, I know, maybe you should do this. Or one of the things we tend to do as men a lot is reflect something that happened in our own life that resonates with that story we just heard. But that's not useful either, because it takes the energy away from that person. They've just gone deep on something. And if you tell a story about you, it just brings the energy back to you. So that's the beauty of that. We allow men to just really go deep. And what I find time and time again, and we do this within the event as well, is as somebody is dealing with a situation or a scenario and they're speaking through it, we ask the other men in the room, who else has experienced this? And the number the number of hands that go up, yeah, me. And the guy's like, oh man, I thought it was just me. And that sense of connection that you get from that is so powerful, because at that moment we realize we're not alone. And so many men have been lone wolfing, but when they realize that there's this access to this community of men who have experienced the same sorts of things, and we're all coming with, different stories. Like, we're going with different nuances of the same story. Maybe from a different background, different socioeconomic background, different set of traumas or triggers, um, and different belief systems. But we're all processing our stuff the same way, or not processing our stuff the same way. We're all dealing with it in a similar way as men. And when we get into that space and we realize, oh, I'm not alone in the way I feel, that is what's powerful.
You know, I'm instantly thinking when you're talking about the being heard part. So yeah, I spoke with a guy. There was a guy in to see me not long ago, and he told, it was, you know, I think of the different stories that I'm told, and what this one was incredibly impactful on me. He talked about how he did not know the last time anyone truly listened to him. He was a boss at work, senior level, so no one really listens to him. Positional leadership, they follow his instructions, but no one truly listens to him. No one really knows who he is. His family, wife, and grown-up kids all want to hear from him, i.e. answers to their questions, but he could not recall the last time any of them truly listened to him. His friends and the social circles that he was going in, you know, the clubs and stuff like that he would move in, there's back and forth conversation, but no one actually has ever asked him, how do you really feel? So this guy is basically moving in this basically roundabout of life where he just goes round and round and round. And he says, I don't actually know what it feels like for anyone to listen to me. I don't, you know, he was consumed in this thought that no one hears me. And it was, you know, as I'm listening to you, I'm drawn to that guy, and I'm thinking, how incredibly powerful is it to really be listened to? And what you said, for no one to try to fix you, but just to really hold space.
Yeah, in psychological terms as well, it's studied that the quality of one person's the quality of one person's listening directly impacts the quality of the other person's thinking. So when you're in a conversation, if you're fully listening, not just holding space, but it's like if you're immersed in what that person is saying, like mind, body, and spirit, like you're really with them and you're engrossed in the story or the share that they're going through, it directly impacts on the quality of their thinking. Because the science also shows, and it used to be that science said that we could focus on or think about 7 different things at the same time. Then it came down to 4, and there was this myth around women having a brain that could multitask more. It's starting to be disproven now that though the women have more connections between the left and right hemisphere, so their brains are a bit faster, all humans can only focus on one thing at a time. Just one. Fully focus on one thing at a time. And if somebody is sharing something with, a deep sense of emotional integrity, and you're not fully focused on it, then their thinking is going to go. But the quality of one person's listening impacts on the quality of another person's thinking. So by you really, really being present, and it's presence over performance, if you're fully present with that person, not just waiting to say what you've got to say or fix them or feedback or anything, if you're just listening for the sake of listening and just exploring, allowing them to explore their thoughts and just witnessing that as its own act, that can help them lead their own thinking and bring out, I call it inner wisdom, because like I said earlier, pulling that thread of thought, so many men don't ever get to do that, especially somebody in a CEO position. I mean, you would imagine that man is a leader and he's in a seat of power, but how powerful does he feel if nobody's listening to him?
Yeah.
How powerful does he feel if he's completely isolated because his voice isn't heard? And that's the misconception that we have around, quote unquote, men in power. Like, a lot of men in power aren't in their power because they're not doing the work. It's what Nietzsche says around, power isn't material power. Power is like sovereign power. It is how you are in yourself. Like, what work have you done in yourself? How do you behave when nobody's watching? How do you treat other people? What depths have you gone into your own emotional intelligence and understanding? Like, all of these things, that's true power, because that's what's going to sustain you. Like, material power can just go away at the drop of a hat, but this is real power. And I find by really sitting with somebody and allowing them to share fully is really cathartic. It's really healing for both people as well, because, like I said, we are the medicine for each other. When someone's sharing a story, something might resonate with you, and if you're not listening, you'll miss it. And there's that inner wisdom there that keeps coming out. If you allow someone to kind of meander through the lanes of their thought, they'll maybe drift off, and you maybe won't understand. I do it all the time. You go off on a tangent, and then you come back and you're like, oh, as I was in that tangent lane, I remembered something. I'm going to bring it back into the fast lane and deliver it, because I was allowed to do it, and nobody interrupted me. So I got all this stuff that's floating about in my head and in my being, and boom, there it came out. And now I understand something about myself a bit more.
Yeah, because you hold the answers. You already hold the answers.
Everyone.
You're going through a series of doors. You're opening each door until you get to the door that you've been looking for. Not that the person is going to give you or open for you. You already hold all the answers.
Absolutely. Yeah, everything. You know what you want to experience. And like I said earlier about vision boarding and manifesting, you know what you want to have. You know what you want. Or some people, if they spend a bit of time, will know what they want. And everything is a choice in order to get to there. And if you're not making the right choices, then you'll be experiencing what you're experiencing until you get to the answer that will lead you to ask yourself the questions to get the answer that will lead you to the vision that you want to experience. And what you're saying about doors as well, a lot of that, what comes up for me when you say that is a conversation I was having with someone recently around the shadows, again, the shadows in our mind, and how shadows have lessons, and how we need to integrate the shadows into our body in order to be or step into the fullness of our being, is what I said. That's a bit woo-woo, but to step into the fullness of our being, we have to integrate all of our shadows. And some people, this guy was talking about how, parts of his shadow and some of the things he'd done were kind of locked in rooms in his mind. Like, oh, I had to keep that guy in the back room. I was like, no, you need to get rid of all the walls, not even any doors. It just needs to be an open plan house. Like, it's all got to be integrated, because we have to accept where we made mistakes and where we failed, and where we could be better, and integrate those shadows, because there's lessons within everything. So yeah, I think it's really important stuff.
And what I want, just conscious of something. If for someone who's listening to this, later on, and they're thinking, but I don't have that, so, I'm screwed, I don't have that. What I hope David and I are trying to press on to you is, you may not have that at the moment, but that can change. You can find your community, you can find your connection. It might not be through, a coach like us, or it might not be through Mantra Menswork, but you need to believe that your connection, your community is out there. And it's about expanding that mindset that you can, what you have now doesn't need to be what you have tomorrow.
Yeah. It's the law of attraction, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, if you start to raise your vibration, then things will be attracted to you. The things that you want will be attracted to you. And our thinking can be so limiting sometimes. Mine was for a very long time. But when I started to change that, and the science about that is, hardwired thinking is hard. It's hard to change, but it can be changed. The good news is that new thinking or new neural pathways are very easy to build. If you're conscious and you're doing the right thing to build them, they can be built very quickly. And then once you repeat them, they will be stored in long-term memory and become hardwiring. But it's uncomfortable and it's difficult. but we have to do it if we want to change our thinking in order to raise our vibration and, access the law of attraction and bring the things we want to us. Then it all starts with our thinking. So that's the invitation for everyone listening, is to start to reframe some of the stories. And in order to do that, you have to listen to your own stories, or maybe find a space where other people listen to them as well, and start to really pick them apart and see where you can reframe the thinking on them.
So you just sort of opened the Pandora box on something there. So, and the reason I'm going to go there is because I passionately believe in, how do I get this right? So I had a previous speaker on, she's massively into manifestation, massively. I am more of a well-formed outcome sort of guy, but I truly believe if I can get myself into a forward way of thinking and start to see what it's going to take me to get to what I'm looking to achieve and what I'd like to happen, I truly believe in it. I truly believe that not just by thinking it, but by actually taking actions into aligning with my thinking,
Totally.
Practicing what I preach, if you like. How does that land with you and your life and your decisions and your sort of direction?
They're the same thing. They happen concurrently. So I've got a vision, but I still have to do the work. Like the vision doesn't just happen because I'm sitting meditating and thinking about it. I still have to, like with money, like if I've got a vision around how much money I want to make, because that's what people connect to most often. So if it's money, like how much money do I want to make? Okay, what are my money blocks? What are my limiting beliefs around money? Do I want to make £1 million this year? Some people go, oh no way, there's no way I can make £1 million. Like, why not? If you truly believe you can make £1 million, if you start to sit in that and go take yourself to the end point of like, I've got £1 million in my bank account, oh my God, and feel what that feels like, and then start working your way back, right? Okay, what do you need to do in order to make £1 million? The first thing you need to do is look at your finances now. What are your finances doing? How do you run your finances? How do you spend? What are you spending on? What are your habits? Where could you cut back? Where could you be more responsible? Where could you be more disciplined? Then it's thinking about income generation, like how do I build this? How do I create systems to get to that? And then how do I build and build and build and build and take responsibility, all the while doing these actions while that vision, I'm just pulling £1 million out of my head, but like of that vision of £1 million is there. And then all the way along the way, every action you take, every choice you make, is it aligned with your vision? Should I spend money on this? Is that going to get me to my £1 million? No, it's not. So I don't do that. Okay, there we go. Back in alignment with my vision. My vision is £1 million. That's where I'm going, and I know what I need to do. I need to be disciplined in order to get there. And that is across everything. Like physical fitness is another one. Super easy, but it's difficult. It's so easy to it's so easy to get fit, but you have to challenge yourself, and it takes a bit of discomfort, and you have to go through the systems and go through the process, sorry, of maybe running, maybe doing this, maybe doing that, looking at your diet, looking at your health, looking at your gut health, looking at your sleep regulation. All of these things impact on how fit you can be. So if you have the vision of like, I want to have a six pack, okay, what are the choices I'm making? I'm going to hold that vision in my mind. What are the choices I'm making? What's the first thing I need to do now? Stop having takeaways. Done. Okay. Stop eating chocolate every day. Done. Okay. Maybe come off coffee. Okay, perfect. Because coffee impacts your liver function and can stop your stomach digesting food properly, which can impact on all your kind of hormonal systems or nervous system regulation. All of these things are really important. So you have to look at it all and start moving towards your vision, but taking the actions in between.
Yeah, nothing worth having is going to come easily, is it?
Exactly, and we are in a culture of convenience and comfort, and I understand that. I'm a victim of it too. Sometimes I sometimes do things that are easy. I sometimes have shortcuts here and there, but I hold myself accountable, and I know like if I do have like some kind of indulgence on something, I'm consciously choosing it, knowing that I'm going to double down and counteract that afterwards. But I'm at the point now where like I'm so connected to my vision that it's happening less and less where I have those indulgences in that way, because the indulgence for me is the discipline to get to my vision. Like, oh wow, amazing. I can show that discipline and self-control and willpower in order to get that. Wow, I'm really, really proud of myself for that. And I still enjoy life. I still enjoy fine things,
Yeah.
but not at a level of indulgence. My good friend Mark John says, you know, indulgence and prayer don't go hand in hand. And if you've got like a vision or a prayer of what you want to be, if you're indulging, then that's out of alignment with that. You can't walk towards your vision if you're indulging all the time.
Yeah, it's I was listening to a song that I absolutely love. I think it represents my life pretty well, which is Jerry Cinnamon Canter.
Mm-hmm.
And some people go, what? But there's a line in that you can't be a king whilst acting like a pawn. And it's true. It's that instant gratification. You know, everyone's you want the moment. You want that the visualization to become real, and you want the goals to be achieved. But you don't, you know, you're looking for that. Well, like you say, that shortcut all the time. You're not willing to sit and actually make the plan. Think about what am I going to sacrifice?
Yep.
That's the thing that scares people loads. What am I willing to give up? What will my life look like to have this thing? You know, because one of the things is you're going to lose, you might lose people, you might lose things, you might lose time,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's doing all that work as opposed to just, no, do you know what? I just want it now. I just want the
Yep.
quick fix now, that kind of thing, that instant sort of, but it doesn't
Instant
last long.
gratification. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't last long, and it's no lighting up the fire inside.
Mm-hmm. I think it's because, you know, in general society, we, we have this almost like a psychological notion that things will last forever. When you're in something, that's it, it's forever.
Yeah.
Not knowing that, you know, this too shall pass.
This too
Everything
shall
passes.
pass. Yeah.
This too shall pass. It'll be over. And you know, the discomfort you're feeling now, or the the compulsion to want that thing or to do that thing, will actually go away. Like, you can stay disciplined and get to that, and the sacrifice is staying on your path and understanding that what you feel like now won't be the same as what you feel like in a month's time or 2 months' time or 6 months' time, because your body will regulate, your nervous system will regulate, your mind will regulate, and you'll become more accustomed to this way of being. But it's hard to rewire that, like we said about hardwiring and building new neural pathways. It takes consistent effort. You have to be consistent with it, and it's a commitment that we make to ourselves. And if we're willing to do it, then the benefits can be massive. What you said about the king there really resonated, because that, you know, we work with the king archetype in our events, and you know, that can be really triggering for people. I've had people come to me and say, "Oh, you think you're a fucking king, do you?" I'm allowed to swear, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like, oh, who the fuck calls himself a king? Because at one of my events, people kind of dubbed me as a joke, an exercise, King David. They said, "Oh, King David," as and just a way for me to feel empowered in that moment, and it was nice. And then it passed. I don't think I'm a king.
No.
I don't go around calling myself King
King
David.
David.
But exactly, so it's ridiculous. But somebody saw this and they're like, "Who calls himself a king?" I was like, "I don't think I'm an act. Do you think I think I'm an actual king?" Wow. Okay. That says a lot more about you than it does about me, because we're so triggered by other people being in their power. Like I said earlier about power. What's wrong with having power? Like
Yeah.
sovereign power and ownership over your actions, ownership and accountability over who you are and what you want to be. That's true power. And other people don't like that, don't like seeing that in others, because maybe they haven't done it to themselves, or they had it and it was taken away from them. Loads of different things can happen to people that cause them to project things onto others. But yeah, that king energy is so interesting, because as men, we often reach a point where it's almost difficult to believe that we're allowed to have that power, because the conversation of men and power is a tricky one. But we're allowed to have that power. There's nothing wrong with power. And because you have power doesn't mean you're taking power away from someone else. Your power is your own. Real sovereign power is your own. Because you have it, it's not that you're taking it that somebody else doesn't have it.
No.
In fact, by you having more of it and by being, the highest expression of king energy is a noble king who raises those around him up. So if you're fully in the king, you're raising the people around you up, and you understand that those people are projecting, and you love them regardless. You might keep them at a distance, and maybe kind of govern your kingdom a little bit more closely, but you still love them, and you're raising them up, and you don't step into the tyrant, which is the shadow of the king, where you tear them down because you're the king and that's it. I'm the boss, and I'm super confident. Look what I can do. The king's a noble king who's done all the shadow work. He doesn't have anything to prove, and he's completely sovereign and solid in himself. He doesn't have to justify to other people why he is the way he is based on how they feel. There's a separation there where we can be quite comfortable being in our power.
And what I take from that is if I'm thinking like a king,
mm-hmm.
I am owning my own mindset. I am owning my own decisions.
Mm-hmm.
I need not fear what that means, because I believe in myself, and
mm-hmm.
I would hope that vibe will attract my tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So that in turn will naturally align me with people who also want to believe in themselves and see themselves as a king or a queen. Mm-hmm. As you said, not to rule over anyone else, but to be internally confident that
mm-hmm.
I can get this right. I can find a way through the tough decisions and the adversity that I'll face.
Mm-hmm. And the biggest area for that pops out in my mind right now is around ambition. That's the easiest one to identify in people. Like if you're an ambitious person and you're really like going for it, then you'll attract other ambitious people to you, and their energy will be like, oh wow, that guy's got the same kind of mindset as me. Cool, I'm going to go towards him because maybe we can, like, he'll ask me the right questions and call me out in the things that I'm doing wrong, and like check in on me and hold me accountable and all these different things. But I know he's going to do it to himself as well, so I want to be around that guy because he's no bullshit. Whereas when you find you're in your king energy and you are ambitious and you're heading towards stuff, and other people, like I said, like we were talking about earlier, keep you rooted in the past by a story that feels comfortable for them.
Yep.
Then the invitation for them is to look at that. Why are they challenging you? Why is it wrong to be ambitious? Why is it wrong to feel powerful? Because it's not. Why do people perceive that to be wrong? Mm-hmm. And when you start to direct the question back to them, and it's not as a judgment either, so it's not projection for projection. You're just asking the question, oh, what's wrong with, why do you think like that? Asking them thinking questions. What does it feel like to think like that? How long have you been thinking about that?
Yeah.
What happens when you think about that? What changes when you think about that? Because directing somebody back to their own thinking can help them analyze and direct their own change. Because if you're an ambitious person, that's great. Leave that person to be an ambitious person. If I'm ambitious, and if people around me aren't ambitious, that's fine. They can still be around me, but I'm heading this way, and they can be part of my life. But I'm going this way. And if you want to come with me, or if you want to join me, or if you want to be part of my life, that's fantastic. But don't try and tear me down or say anything about what I'm doing, because not in this, that sounds bad, but like you can question me, but don't like judge me for it, or put your own projections on it, because I'm holding myself accountable, and I've got a group around me that are holding me accountable as well. I think it's really, really important that we honor that.
I see what you've just described there. I see that loads in the whole, when people get into sport and fitness and want to get fit, and suddenly you notice that when they maybe they're posting things on their Facebook and things like that, and their friends and family are sort of tearing them down with these sort of double-edged jokes and comments and things. One of the things I noticed, when I started the Fit As Your Dad movement, was people were screaming out for a place that they could go, this private page where they could just talk about the things that was making them happy. And I was like, people are saying, "No, this is fantastic what you've done here with this," and I'm like, really? I see it as damning on society that people needed a private, safe place. Men needed that place because they can't even be comfortable in this, this journey into health and fitness and sort of living a healthier, fitter life. But you see that they start to become much more aligned, and then you see them, they've got stronger connection with people that are aligned to getting fit and getting out running and going to the gym and doing that kind of thing. And suddenly they've almost, you just see that pull away from the old sort of groups and things, and they're much more at home within that. But it's sad that has to happen, but it's important.
And what we said earlier around people know the answers. Like when you have conversations with people, because I don't drink alcohol and I don't drink any caffeine, and I don't eat any refined sugar, and people sometimes hear me say that and I go, "What an arsehole." But it's a decision I made for my own health because I feel the best I've ever felt. I sleep the best I've ever, and I've got 3 children. One of them's 1 year old, and I still sleep very good because I don't burn out my adrenal systems and put toxins in my body like alcohol, caffeine, and sugar. Because I don't do that, my body's in a healthy state. But I have conversations with people around that, or like even when you're out, and it's something in our culture that we can only really connect with people on those 3 things: alcohol, coffee, and junk food. Like it's the go-to. Oh, do you want to go for a drink? I don't drink. Oh, let's go for a coffee then. I don't drink coffee. Oh, should we go out for some food? It depends where we go because I don't eat sugar. Like, and these people are like, oh my God, never mind. I'm like, great, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Like, I'm totally happy. Like, I'm not missing out on anything because I don't want to do those things. But you can still come and like, let's go for a walk around the park. Better yet, let's go for a run. Let's do something healthy instead of putting shite in our body.
Yeah.
But when you have these, when people, it's almost like an apathetic, like treat response. Like, oh, I deserve a treat. I've been working all week. I'm going to give myself a treat. It's like you're going to treat yourself by poisoning yourself. That's not a good idea. Like a treat to me is something completely different.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how in our culture we connect over those 3 things more than anything else. And that's what we're starting to change now through Mantra Menswork, is for men particularly, creating connections that are built on really healthy behaviors, because healthy behaviors allow us to be more open, more honest, hold each other more accountable, and like I said, expand that sphere of competence because we're becoming more comfortable with the uncomfortable. We're challenging ourselves. We're testing each other as men to step up. And if if you're going out and getting absolutely like steaming, and then you're hungover for 2 days, particularly if you're a parent, like that's not okay, in my opinion. I was like, there's a level of responsibility and accountability. If you want to step into the mature masculine, then you have to make sacrifices, like we said earlier. And for me, it's not even a sacrifice. Like it's a gift, not having any alcohol in my system, or sugar or caffeine. It feels phenomenal. And it allows me to be much sharper. And again, looking at my vision and where I'm going, my ambition, where it's driving me, and what I want to manifest in this life, if I'm clean, my good friend Rory Lamont from KM says, if you keep your body clean, it's like an antenna for, he says source energy, but whatever that is, like you're an antenna for abundance, you're an antenna for prosperity, you're an antenna for high vibrational people coming around you, because you're not dipping into low vibe stuff like alcohol, caffeine, and junk food. When you keep your body clean, the rest of you elevates.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've just what did you say his name was? Rory
Lamont.
Rory Lamont. I love that. I love that.
And
And
it really landed with me.
even just the things, take away those things that you're mentioning, you can also add in toxic people. You know, it could be friends, family members, it could be a job, it could be
Oh yeah.
that goes so much further. If
Oh,
you
let's go deeper. Let's go deeper. With men, it's pornography. If men are, watching porn all the time, that's not healthy.
no,
That messes up your brain more than most things, and it doesn't help healthy relationships. It's not disciplined. It's the fast food version of sex. It's it's just not a healthy practice. So stuff like that, yeah, and toxic people around you, but like toxic things, toxic
gambling,
behaviors. Gambling is definitely one of them. Let's think of another one. Maybe toxic environments. I mean, I know football's fun to go to because there's a sense of camaraderie and something happens when you get into that tribe. But if you're hearing some of the things that are
yeah,
said at a football game,
yeah,
that's not good to have that going into your, like, actually being absorbed.
yeah,
It's not a good energy to be
yeah,
around. Um, yeah, there's loads of things like that that are not healthy behaviors, and if we avoid them and we keep ourselves a bit clean, and that's not to say that you have to be the Dalai Lama
no,
in order to get to reach your vision. It's just about having discipline and realizing where things aren't serving you anymore. Because if getting drunk every weekend is, you know, impacting your relationships, or it's making you sluggish, making you not show up as a dad and the best you can, or it's impacting your work productivity, by the time you get back to Monday and you're still a bit shot and you're having to pound 6 coffees in the day just to stay awake, like, all of these behaviors, all of these things are not helping you reach that highest vision of yourself, or the highest vision you want for your life. So starting to be more disciplined and just think about what serves you best. If you were putting it down on paper as a business plan, what's the optimal outcome here? What's the optimal outcome, and what do I need to do in order to get there? Drinking, eating junk food, watching porn, gambling,
yeah,
being around toxic people,
yeah,
it's not it.
yeah. So that's the rabbit hole. That one, I know we could fill a whole day on that one.
Absolutely.
So to lift elevators up a little
Yes.
bit. What's next? What you talk about your vision and your manifestation and stuff. So I get the impression you've got a clear idea of where you want to get to.
Mm-hmm.
So you're I think you've got a fantastic brand. Like, take away what our conversation today, I was already really impressed by what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But what's next? How far do you want to take this thing that you're doing? What's your own hopes, without giving away all your crown jewels and platinum tickets? But what do you want to do, David, next?
Hey, for me, I mean, the growth around Mantra for me is about, first of all, developing a community. So building this community of men who are stepping forwards into something else, a more kind of mature masculine expression, and all that comes along with that. From there, there will be a number of levels. So I have my life coaching, which is, developing and growing. And uh, when I'm ready, that is going to get launched in a new way very soon. But going forwards, there will be an increase in the number of events that people can attend. There will be membership options and a membership community within Mantra. There will be leadership training. People can step up and co-facilitate and have to go through facilitators training. Um, there'll be a number of courses that I'm developing that are nearly finished right now, and that'll be coming out very soon around men's self mastery and Forging Fathers, which is the name of my podcast as well. But Forging Fathers will be a course around how we initiate or create a rite of passage for men to step into fatherhood, and that doesn't begin when they become a dad. That begins when they are thinking about having a baby. So preconception, we are thinking, right, how am I going to be a dad, and what skills do I need in order to be the best dad I can be? And we start to do that from moment of conception right the way through the pregnancy, showing up for the pregnancy, showing up for the birth. I'm going to do birth partner training, because we had three home births, and we did a lot of work on our relationship in order to allow those home births to be beautiful and successful and almost ceremonial. The first was 6 hours, the second was an hour and a half, the third was 45 minutes. Like all of these births were wonderful and difficult and challenging, but beautiful at the same time. And we did a lot of work on our relationship in order to make those the way they were. So informing birth, allowing men to show up for their partners during birth and postpartum, and then obviously moving into dadding. Like how do we be a good dad? What values do you need in order to be the best dad you can be? On top of that, I'll be looking at offering rites of passage for young men. So we'll be doing a youth program next year. Currently developing that now. So shepherding young men into manhood is super important because it's something our culture from previous generations hasn't really had. Like a real presence of this mature masculine or elders in our community to guide men into manhood and providing them with a proper rite of passage where there's challenge and they can mark when it was they became a man. Because right now in our society we don't have that. Like women have, menstruation and birth. Like they're two physiological changes that happen in their body when they move through, womanhood, from the maiden mother and into the crone. So they have markers that identify where they are in their evolution. Men, like, we grow some hair and get some boners, and then that's about it. Like we don't have a physiological thing that happens to us that marks, or a ceremony that marks when we become a man. And I think that's really important to bring back into our culture. So I'll be doing that and loads of other things around that, around potential schoolwork, and I'd like to go to underprivileged or deprived communities as well and support men in those environments too. So lots coming next year. But right now, it's about building this community of men and allowing men to liberate themselves from all of the limiting beliefs and stories that we've been told as men for such a long time.
So what I hear there is you're going to get incredibly busy.
Oh yes.
So but that brings risk.
Uh-huh.
That brings risk to David. No, Mantra Menswork, David
Mm-hmm.
Millar.
Mm-hmm.
How will you look after you during this period of growth where you naturally, success brings expectation, it brings pressure,
Mm-hmm.
it brings demands. How are you going to manage that? How are you going to look after you?
Yeah, I say new levels, new devils.
Yeah, I like
So
that.
every time you reach a new level, there's a new devil. So for me, it's just staying consistent with my vision, staying consistent with my routines and practices, staying connected to my family, because I don't want to change how I'm showing up as a dad. I'm full-time dad right now,
Yeah.
but that will change come July, and there'll be more of a shared responsibility, and it'll be more harmonious. But I still want to be a very present dad. That's my number one focus. That's why I left my job. That's why I wanted to be around my family and my dad, much more. Not falling into the kind of full protector mode and provider mode, sorry, where I go and just take myself away to work. So staying connected to my family is super important. Surrounding myself with like-minded, ambitious, high vibration, goal-orientated, and compassionate, mature people, men and women. And within that group of people, some of them will be within Mantra, so there'll be support staff, leadership, and facilitators. So yeah, we'll be growing our staff over the next year and bringing more people in so that the onus isn't always on me, because I've fallen ill of that in the past.
Yeah.
Like I've always liked to do. So whenever I'm leading something, like my natural disposition is to do it all, like to be in the middle of the room and to guide and lead everything and to hold myself to a super high standard of facilitation and coaching. And this is how I show up. And if everybody else around me is not showing up like that, then you can stay at the side. That's absolutely fine. But this is what I'm asking for. This level of ownership over what we're doing, what we're saying, and how we show up as coaches. So I'm starting to kind of, without sacrificing my values and my integrity around that, allow myself to step back a little bit and fully trust in other people. Um, the trust has to be earned first, obviously, but like fully trusting other people to step into that space as well. So that's going to be a really interesting evolution for me over the next year. It started to happen now, and I'm going to expand on that and just allow myself to preserve my energy. Because
Yeah,
if I do it all, I burn out.
yeah. I ask that because, you know, it's something, I guess I'm, over the last couple of years, a lot of changes for myself in that front, making, I kind of describe it as, it's like the dinner plate, and you
Mm-hmm.
put, you know, so you've got the dinner plate full of things you want to have, but sometimes that plate can just be a little bit too much, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, and if you even your favorite meal, if you eat too much of it, you're not going
Yes.
to feel too good.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about taking everything off the plate and just making sure that you put on those things that add value and bring meaning to your life.
Yes.
Might have a little bit of the things that are sort of non-negotiables that you might not want too much of it, but
Mm-hmm.
you've got to do a bit of it. But
Yeah.
just making sure that you're not taking on too much, because somewhere there'll be a price to pay. And I guess one of the things I had to look at was I wasn't giving the best of myself to each area.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to take a couple of things off the plate, and replace it maybe with one thing that added a lot of value and made me a lot more happier.
Mm. Yeah, that speaks to me about balance. So like
Yeah,
having like a map of an energy map, I do energy maps
yeah,
all the time
yeah,
where is my energy going?
yeah,
And if your energy map is at a 10 all the way around, like that's not good. You can't have that. Like you need to be able to pull back on some areas to apply full energy to another area, but having a plan. Like so planning for me is the number one thing. So planning and systems allow me to preserve my energy. So over this year I've been building a lot of systems that will come into full effect soon. But these systems are like automated. So automated systems that don't require my energy at
yeah,
all, but they
yeah,
require energy to build. But then once they're built, like that energy just goes woof back into another area where I apply myself in more fully in that direction. Um, but in order to do that, there has to be a clear plan. There has to be accountability. There has to be goals. There has to be actions, and always this higher vision. And the systems that we do in place allow for energy preservation, path of least resistance, and you to apply yourself, or for me to apply myself more fully and be more front facing and engaging with people. If I'm on my laptop all the time, taking bookings and doing different things, like I'm not with people,
yeah,
I don't want to do that.
yeah,
My purpose, my dharma in life is to be in spaces with men doing this stuff. So I need to be there.
yeah,
You know, how I'm there will differ depending on the leadership I have around me, but I need to be in that room. I can't
yeah,
be on my laptop doing admin all the time.
yeah, yeah. The energy mapping stuff is probably something. It's probably something I haven't done as much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I sort of developed a little idea that when I was heavily involved in the Fit Your Dad's movement, we called it the trifecta.
Mm-hmm.
So I symbolize. I don't ask me why. I've got a big thing about triangles. I don't know why. So triangles is a thing that I'm always drawn to. But I explained to the guys about the triangle represents the different areas of your life. So you've got family and relationships in one corner,
Mm-hmm.
you've got health and fitness in another corner, and you've got career and education in another. I says, and if what you do is you stand yourself in the middle of the triangle, and if you can get somewhere towards the middle, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you find that you are more edged towards a corner, then make sure the reason you're edged towards the corner is for a reason that add value to your life. So if you're more in work, but you can justify that saying, well, I'm preparing for a job interview or a promotion or something like that, so it's a real reason for that, or I'm a little bit more in health and fitness because I've got a marathon in a few weeks, that's okay. As long as you can check that out with yourself, But if you go, well, I'm standing here and I realise that I've got no relationship with my wife and kids,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but I'm working a 70-hour week.
Mm-hmm.
Right, okay, there's a fucking problem here.
Yes.
You know, if I'm in the gym 7 days a week because I'm obsessed with the gym and I'm turning up late to work and I've got no energy at work and
Mm-hmm.
I'm falling asleep as soon as I get home, there's a problem here.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of, it's a way that I do it, you know, well, something, what's causing this state? Why am I here? Right, okay, where's the adjustment needed? What corner do I need to make a little change?
Mm-hmm. And where can you be honest with yourself? Like a lot of people, will say they work in a 70-hour a week. Will say, "Oh, I need to do that because I need to pay the bills. And like I've got to make the money. I'm the breadwinner." I was like, "But do you need that much? Like, well, what have you done your finances? Do you actually know how much money you need to pay the bills and put a bit of savings away and look after everyone in your family? Do you actually know what the amount is, and what can move? Like what outgoings? How much do you spend in your car per month?
Yeah, yeah,
How much do you spend on holidays? How much do you spend on food per week? Can you Do you have that financial breakdown? Can you pull back on different areas to allow you to work less and be with your family more?"
yeah.
When you ask those questions to people, like, "Well, I don't actually know." I was like, "Well, go and find out."
Start
Because
there.
like, start there. Like, don't make excuses. Just say, "Oh, I need to work." No, you don't. Like, it's the age-old thing of like working smart versus working hard. Like, people can be at a 70-hour week and not be optimizing how much money they're making or optimizing their time properly. Whereas if you start to look at those things, then it can really impact on all of your relationships in a positive way.
Yeah, because the money one, like you're thinking that, well, it's to give my family what they want, what they need, and when really what they want is your company, your
Yep.
presence, your love, your laughter.
Mhm. And what is that worth?
What's that worth? Do you really need to have that laptop? You've finished work for the day, you've still got the laptop open, or you're still on the phone taking work calls while your kid is sitting there, just want a conversation, a
Mm-hmm.
laugh, a story, take them to
Mm-hmm.
the club, ask them how their day's been.
Yeah.
What one's worth more?
Yeah. And the two things that are there as well is like, how are you using your time? So like if you say, "Oh, there's no time for that," you've got the same amount of hours as everyone else. Like,
Yeah.
what time are you going to bed? How long do you spend? If you look at your screen time on your
Screen
phone,
time.
how long have you spent on Instagram today? I bet you it's above 6 hours. 6 hours of looking at Instagram. And what do you remember from looking at Instagram? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's like complete dopamine scrolling. Like nobody really engages with it in a healthy way. Some people will jump on there for business, but then get down a rabbit hole. So they'll have done a little bit, but then get lost. We all do. I do it sometimes as well. And I'm really conscious that I want to put my phone down now. So when I finish work, when I'm working full time, I have an act of finishing. Like when work is done, it's done. The phone goes off and I'm fully present. I do that all the time right now because I'm full-time dad, so I'm fully present all the time. But how do you use your time is
Yeah.
your choice. How you
Yeah.
use your time is your choice. Do you get up early and do a workout so that your body feels good and you've
Yeah.
got higher levels of testosterone, which help with stress reduction in men?
Yeah.
No? Okay, you get up late and snooze your alarm.
Yeah.
Two things happen there. You resent yourself, and your partner sees that you just snoozed the alarm and they
Yeah.
don't think that you're somebody who shows up every day. It's subconscious. They might not say it, but they're thinking it. "Oh God, he's lazy." It's the connotation that comes with that. So don't be lazy.
Yeah.
Get up early, do a workout, make the breakfast for the kids, give your wife a kiss, go to work. When you finish work, finish at a good time. Turn your phone off and do something ritual every day that's like dust your hands and go, "I'm done work," and say it to yourself, and then just walk in the house and have nothing on your mind other than the family.
Yeah.
Like these things are achievable and they're quite easy, but again, they're rewiring. They have to be done consistently. They're behaviors that have to be implemented into our daily actions for them to take hold. And if we don't do them, then we get caught in this cycle of, "Oh, I just have to work." And you don't.
Yeah.
Who tells you you have to work? You don't even enjoy work.
Yeah.
No, most people, not all people. A lot of people do enjoy their work. But if you don't enjoy your work and you're saying you have to work more, you need to really refine this and figure out what's going on and make different choices.
Wow. Every single question, every single answer, sorry, is thought provoking. So it then it leads me into so many other things. But I'm conscious it's Sunday. I'm conscious you will have plans, and I'm
Yeah.
conscious that we could just chat all day. Listen, this has been incredible. Really, really good for me personally, just to sit and chat with you. I know it's going to be great for people to listen to this,
Yeah.
and just sort of just start to. I just like it's like just switching the gas on. You know,
Hmm.
we just start to think, and especially men are going to listen to this and go, right, I need to go find this Mantra Menswork and find out what is this they are talking about. And trust
Hmm.
me, guys that are listening, when you find David's page, be prepared for just getting lost in this consuming thought of what is going on there. Because I have been like tuned into loads and loads of the stuff David puts up on Instagram, and wow, it blows your mind, because you're just kind of going, that one, it looks really powerful, but two, you're just trying to get your head around how different it is to the current normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what society tells us is normal, this is not what this looks like. But in
Hmm.
actual fact, this is exactly what normal looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes people say like, "Oh man, that looks a bit crazy," but I challenge it and be like, "What's crazier?
What is crazy?
What's crazier? Like living in a like shut down state, not accessing your emotional integrity, or coming along and expressing yourself fully and going back and showing up better? Like, what's crazier?"
Yeah, man. So I appreciate this, brother. This
Thank
has
you,
been
man.
fantastic. I can't thank you enough for coming on and just being authentic, you know, and raw and real conversation.
Yeah, man. That's what I do. I love it.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to. Hopefully, my plan is I'm going to come to the Dundee event. I'm buzzing. I can't wait.
Amazing.
I can't wait to try it. So anyone, that's tuning in, please share the word. The Mind Master podcast. It's just about real people, real conversations. Just trying to keep the subject of mindset and mental health alive, and having conversations like this with David. Reaching you guys, and for you guys to share that on and let other people hear it as well. It means a lot, and you never know. Listening to a conversation like this might just save a life, and on
Mhm.
that, we need to keep doing what we can do. So thanks very much, David.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.